Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are located. My name is Dario from Next Pharma Summit, and great pleasure and honor to welcome this extraordinary, interesting session today with the title Across the Care Continuum, Empowering Patients and Caregivers. Today, great pleasure to welcome four extraordinary panelists. So from my left to the right, I would kind of like to welcome Desiree from Otsuka. Hi, Desiree, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jen from Savvy Cooperative. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Chiffon Wong from EMD Serrano. Hi, Chiffon.
Here, good day.
And Corey from Omnipresence. Corey.
Hello, everyone.
How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, before we start, I would like to launch an interesting poll which we prepared for today. And that's why I would kind of like to ask the audience to reply on the question, which will be like setting the stage question, which is in which of the following areas exist the biggest gaps for your organization in terms of patient engagement? I think we can give like 40-45 seconds for that, and afterwards we can comment on the results. What do you think will be the lucky winner? Anyone?
I'm thinking about it. To me, I'm really interested to see what people say because I think they're all very important topics here.
Okay, so 50% of the people voted. I will close the pool and share the results. And the winner, actually, we have equal result with patient involvement in trial or product design with 40% and equally patient experience and engagement after drug is in the market. Ladies and gentlemen, comment on that. Who would like to start first?
Well, I guess I'll go. I think when we think about this first one, the patient involvement, it's very important because we know patients are much more empowered and active in their journeys. And so if we're making it difficult for them, or we're doing things in a way that aren't considering their needs, then obviously that's going to be a barrier or a turnoff for them in getting involved. And likewise, I think that part of getting involved, if you've got a barrier there, most likely that ties into the ongoing engagement, right? Because if it's difficult to get involved, it's going to be most likely difficult to engage throughout the program.
Thank you, Corey. Desiree, Chiffon, Jen?
Yeah, my guess was going to be that it was patient involvement in trial or product design, just because it is a little bit harder. I think, companies oftentimes have objectives that they want to meet, and so they move forward with their product design or trial design as is. And I think it's a different way of thinking now to get patients involved really early to help design it out. And I mean, it's an emerging trend, and it's one that I love to see, but I think there's probably the most opportunity for growth there.
Thank you.
And I think that that's what we see hopefully more and more of, but that patients are getting involved earlier on in not only just trial design, but even before then, especially when companies are entering a new therapeutic area. Your guesses of what patients want out of a new therapeutic may not always be right. That, what patients want, providers want, sponsors, insurance companies, they all have different priorities. So it's really important to also talk to patients to understand their unmet needs and their barriers. What do they want out of a new therapeutic? And then you get them involved in the trial design, both from protocol development, understanding feasibility, recruitment and retention strategies. We have patients involved in marketing campaigns, reviewing them to make sure they're culturally sensitive and they're reaching diverse participants so that we can get the type of representation that we want in the trial. And all of these things apply to when a product actually hits the market. If we didn't design it properly up front, then when it hits the market and it's hard for the patient to use, or it has unwanted side effects, or all of these things, or it's not meaningfully solving their problem, we call the patient non-compliant. But it is not the patient's fault that the process, the drug, is failing them and their needs. It's that we as an industry have not done the work up front to understand what really the patients want and need.
Yeah, and Jen, even to add to that, I think some of the insights that we gain through clinical trials, carrying that through commercialization is so important. And sometimes, unfortunately, organizations are siloed and those insights don't always get carried over, but there's such value in making sure that patient experience is carried through not only from clinical trials, but all the way through commercialization.
Thank you. Chiffon?
When I look at these responses, I'm not surprised. And so where we have gaps means we also have opportunities. And I think to the last point that was made, it's really important for us as organizations to look at this as being an all aboard type of activity, where we want to take different functions in an organization who might be touching the patient and having different interactions to kind of come together to think more holistically and strategically about these big opportunities for patient inclusion, all the way from research, development, and commercialization.
Thank you very much. So let's start with the panel, and let's start with our first question, which is quite simple, and I think that we all need to set the foundations and define what is real patient empowerment. I suggest to start with Corey. Corey?
Yeah, I think patient empowerment really, at its heart, that's what the patients want, right? Because there are so many choices and options and education and information they have. You know, it's their healthcare journey is not this black box that it was decades ago, right? They can go and learn and do many things for themselves. And this can be the basic things like, we know much more about healthy diets and exercise routines and stuff. So, that awareness and interest in those things only makes sense that it flows through here. And to me, a big part of the patient empowerment, and I think the shift that needs to happen in the industry is where so much of the information is sort of a push, right? The providers, the product creators are pushing their information out, and like we were just saying, not taking that time at the front to think about the needs of all the stakeholders and empathizing with them so that they can do this in a way that does meet those patients' needs. So really, I think this is a shift from a push to a pull where patients really want to be the drivers, and if we're not treating them as the drivers, that's where they're going to drop out right from the beginning.
Thank you, Corey. Desiree, same question for you. How would you define real patient empowerment?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Corey was saying. I think meeting patients where they are to fit into their lifestyle. It's not just about their treatment experience, but it's really how does it fit into their overall life, and having that empathy just on the manufacturer side to understand that journey and how to best meet their needs. Because I agree, as Corey said, they are in the driver's seat and we have to treat them that way. And I think that is a mindset shift that it's exciting to see that pharma is definitely stepping up to the plate and thinking about it that way.
Thank you. Jen, Chiffon?
Well, I would like to just add some clarity. When I think we talk about patient empowerment, patient engagement, patient experience, we can look at it either on the individual level or on the systems level. So when we think about patient empowerment in terms of an individual patient feeling empowered to take control of their own healthcare and treatment plan and having informed conversations with their providers and whatever that means to really make sure that they're involved and more of an active participant. There's also then sort of the patient empowerment on the larger level, which is kind of more of what we're talking about here, of how do we get patients more involved in the process so that they know that they are a partner in the innovation and acceleration of bringing new drugs to market. So just to add some clarity, we use this sort of terminology in both camps, and I think that we can really kind of delineate which one we're talking about.
Thank you.
I think we also need to think about the idea of capacity and capability for engagement, and on both sides. Sometimes when we talk about that, it's kind of this assumption that, well, of course, as an industry, we have the capacity and capability. But it really is a bidirectional need to think about how do we come together to have actual engagements that are high quality? How do we align around principles of shared purpose? How do we make sure that we really understand what are the relative priorities and what that requires to help us work together?
Thank you very much. Very nice answers. Let's move forward to the next question, which is how would we define a patient experience in the whole patient journey? And did COVID accelerate or improve that? Plus, what do you see next in terms of experience in that whole patient journey? Maybe this time we can start with you, Desiree.
Sure. So answering the question, did COVID accelerate it? I think it put more emphasis on it. I don't know that, at least I'm speaking for myself, these are my own opinions, but I don't know that we had a good handle on what that patient experience truly was before COVID. I think now that it's driving more towards digital, we're seeing that patient empowerment, because I think it's harder to get a hold of some of the physicians, and they are even more so in the driver's seat than ever before. I think it's more important to start measuring it and really tracking it. And I do think it's going to be more through digital channels. After COVID, will it return to what it was? It might a little bit, but I still think that digital is here to stay, and tracking that experience and that journey and making sure that they are having a good experience is something relatively new, at least for me. So it's something I'm looking forward to focusing on and really starting to make sure that we're making an impact there.
Thank you. Jen?
I think when it comes to sort of patient experience, we can also talk about it in both those kind of different systems or individual level. I think here now we're talking about the individual part of our patients having a better experience in light of all the things that have rolled out because of the pandemic. And, to Desira's point, that I think we are seeing changes that were made very quickly out of necessity to roll out things like telehealth and a lot of digital products to engage patients remotely. But we did so really quickly. Again, we needed to, we didn't have the luxury of time. But in doing so rapidly, we probably did not go through all of the necessary sort of checkpoints that would have been beneficial to understand if these things are working for patients. Because to Siobhan's point earlier, are we giving them the tools, the empowerment, the education, understanding if they are ready and empowered to take on these things? And so it could just be access to things like technology, but also, are they comfortable with it? This has come up time and time again with telehealth of what is their environment like? Do they have family members that are close by that it's, culturally insensitive to be talking about these kind of things? And so therefore we need to be thinking about not just solving the problem. Can we get a patient on the phone with a doctor? There's a lot of other things that have to be worked out as well. So I definitely want to have all of these different innovations here to stay. It's just, have we thought through it all, and maybe we should take a pause and reevaluate if there are some things that perhaps we didn't think about when we rolled things out.
Thank you, Jen. Chiffon?
I'll take the first part of the question regarding, COVID and what are some thoughts there. I'm hoping that we're all more sensitized to the idea of the importance of design, the impact of access, and the barriers that exist. I'm hearing more social behavioral science conversations, and people are looking into spaces that people really hadn't talked about a lot before. And so I hope that by being more kind of interdisciplinary and understanding how what we're trying to deal with typically are often public health challenges, that public health will continue to be elevated. And I hope that's something that stays with us. Regarding what do I see next in terms of patient experience and opportunities, I'm hoping that we're going to keep being earlier and being more strategic. So for example, patient-focused medicine development is going to be rolling out about how do we engage patients now in preclinical spaces and early discovery. I think that's a great opportunity. That's something that the patient community has been asking for many years. I think we've made some progress when it comes to the development space when we're preparing for some of our pivotal trials. Yet when we go back to the ideas of how do we select even our indications for an asset that can maybe go into 9 spaces, we think a lot about mechanistic data. We think a lot about commercial impact. How do we begin to find structural ways to actually include the patient voice into that conversation? So I'm excited about these opportunities for us to really begin doing that earlier.
Thank you, Chiffon. Corey?
Yeah, I really would like to build on a couple things that Jen was saying, where she talked about the patient population or the segments versus the individuals, and to me there's sort of an important nuance there, really making sure that we are personalizing the journey and making sure that we're treating the patient as a human with individual and distinct attributes and preferences relative to the broader population of the trial that they must be in. So we want to make sure we're treating the patient as a human, not as a test subject. And probably everyone's heard this sort of thing around trials of I'm a guinea pig or whatever it is. So there is a bit of a reputation there, and I think some of that we can use as a bit of a reminder to improve things and how we're doing it. And to me, really, it comes into this next slide here of keeping that patient at the center of what you're doing, and remembering that they are a human throughout the journey.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Or as Jen has it in the background, ask patients, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, let's move to the next question. I would say one of the biggest issues why patient centricity and engagement fails is definitely this mismatch between different management functions in any pharma company. And this lack of support from different management functions, I think, leads us to the next question, which is how to achieve and design a cross-organizational patient organization. We all know there are several pharma companies who really master that, and we all know that there are some others which didn't master that in such a successful way. So maybe we can start with you, Corey, because you have this insight from outside pharma, and what's basically your opinion why pharma companies are missing that this match between different functions.
Yeah, I think to me this is a super important one, and I can use a story from my past life where I was making electronic health record software for senior care, right? And you can imagine when you're living in an assisted living facility, and every day you've got a new person coming in to help you with your basic necessities, your activities of daily living, of getting dressed, or organizing your room, to getting down to the dining room to eat, right? And if any one of those people, if you've got a sensitivity because you've hurt your leg, for example, and the next person who comes in on the next shift, you're constantly telling people that you've got an injured leg and you've got to be treated differently, that's a fail on the system. That's a fail on the interoperability of the data, right? When the caregiver goes in, they should know these are the attributes of the person that they're dealing with, and here's how to treat them, right? And I think when we put this into the aspects of clinical trials, you're capturing data on the patient at all these steps on the journey, and it's different people at every step in the journey from the people who are running the trials. Are those people who are capturing the data aware of those individual needs and preferences, right? So again, it's that personalization of knowing what each person needs and following through. If the data doesn't flow, you're not going to be able to have that personalization.
Correct. Chiffon?
I think we would be amazed if we could really see behind the veil of all the patient insights we kind of have that we haven't integrated. It's really something when you think about it. I talked about earlier how we all have different functions who are touching the patient in some way, but I think sometimes we really struggle on how do we come together to think about what is the strategic need in a particular disease area, and to really have models that support that, and then to have the underlying business technology and IT to really then leverage the data that we are gathering from each of our interactions, and then to kind of distill those into insights that are actionable to really make decisions to get us to a better end result. I think that's going to really be the next frontier for us on the tech side. And then on the behavioral side, I think it's really important to make sure that the organization altogether is coming along. I've been in different settings and people say, well, who in your organization owns the patient? And I say, well, no one owns patients, first of all. And we should all be trying to work together as one for patients, with patient at center. So helping each function understand what that means for them and what that should look like in their strategic planning and their operational planning is going to be key. And so I think we need to continue to do a lot of training internally about what that looks like so that we can deliver value.
Thank you, Chiffon. Jen?
I think it comes back to, as I explained some of the things before, around the patient experience of what goes wrong when we don't do the work up front. When it comes to thinking about like interoperability from the patient experience, I'll give an example from my own life, just that my health records don't all talk together. And I am an empowered patient that, certainly has probably a higher health literacy than some to be able to take all the necessary steps that I need to. And I'll share this anecdote that it was, maybe last year that I had a specialty appointment that was booked. It was about 6 months in advance as I was going to see a new doctor. And the time came and I have, patient portals for all my different systems. As somebody with many chronic illnesses, I don't always see all my doctors and specialists in the same system. And of course, they're all powered by the same EHR company that shall remain nameless on the back end, but they don't all talk together. But Apple Health Kit pulls them together. I have them all somehow fragmented, but they're together. And I say to my new specialty office when they said, do you have your health, or we need to get your health records? I said, don't worry, I got them. They're like, yeah, but we need the doctor's notes, which we know they don't give patients the physician notes, so they don't feel like they have the complete record. But in order for me to get those to my new provider, I would need to have a fax machine and access to a CD-ROM to then get these records on a CD to bring to my specialist. And this could not happen in the time period from when they contacted me to when my appointment was. So I had to cancel that appointment that I had booked 6 months in advance, and I had all my records on my phone. I did everything I possibly could outside of having this antiquated technology that I didn't know I needed. And so again, now I'm the bad patient that's not following my treatment plan when this is the barrier of the lack of interoperability within what I need as a patient.
Thank you, Jen. Very meaningful. Desira? We can't hear you.
The classic, you're on mute, sorry.
The most frequent question this year, can you hear me, right?
Yes, exactly. No, I think everything that everybody has been saying is so important, and at least on the manufacturer side, if we could truly have that interoperability, even just within the manufacturer side, to map that patient journey all the way through, it would be incredibly valuable. So what I'm seeing is more and more the different functions are coming together to share those insights, to at least do it from that perspective, because you're right, the data interoperability is a challenge, and it's something that I think everybody is working towards. But at least sharing the insights, we're starting to better understand what that patient journey is, and going back to the experience question, trying to map that experience, optimize it, and make sure that patients can ultimately access our products and have a good experience while they're doing it and have it fit into their lives.
Thank you, Desira.
Yep.
Based on the answers, it really makes me wonder, how can we improve patient collaboration and engagement? And I think that we should definitely start with this question with Jen, because she is actually a patient. So, Jen?
Well, I think we've been talking about this in a variety of ways. There's no one way to do patient engagement either. And I think that that's what we see companies come to us and say, yeah, like, what is the perfect, patient engagement? And the whole point is that, as we think that patient engagement is a verb, it's not a noun, it's not a one-time thing. This should be an ongoing plan that you have in your product development, or be it clinically or commercial. And so that's where I think there certainly are those that get hung up in the details of it, of let's make sure that we have everything in place. We know exactly who we're going to talk to, as if they're going to do it once a year and that's it. So I think trying to start somewhere, and that could be in a variety of different ways, be it bringing together a couple patients or a larger group of patients. What we think about too is that at different times in your sort of roadmap and development, it may be beneficial to go to a wider group of patients to get broader perspective, but then to go and validate those assumptions in a more interactive way with a smaller group. So that's where it's going to fluctuate. It's going to look different for different times in your development process. But what I do want to point out is, regardless of whether it's broad or narrow in terms of how many patients you might be connecting with, it's really, really important to make sure you have the specificity of who you're trying to connect with. That's where I do believe, is some damage when we say we are all patients. Because while this is true, and I'm excited if it galvanizes us to all care about it, you are not the right patient at the right time. And that's really, really important, be it needing to think specifically about disease or therapeutic area, medications, insurance coverage, race and ethnicity, gender. All of these things matter if we care about serving the population that we're innovating for. Or we could be, of course, innovating for a large group, but we really don't understand the needs of this part of the subset of the people that we're looking to reach. So I do caution people, when they think about patient engagement, to really take the time to do the work with the group that you're trying to innovate for. Otherwise, it's just sort of innovation for innovation's sake, and you aren't maybe meaningfully solving the problems of those that you're trying to serve.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Ed. Chiffon, how do you see can we improve the patient collaboration?
Well, it's so interesting because I'm really thankful for what the FDA has really been advancing when it comes to the draft guidances, when it comes to patient-focused drug development. I think those 4 documents and the conversation surrounding them as they continue to evolve is really important because it does speak to some of the dimensions that Jen has been talking about. We do need to have this comprehensive yet representative input. We do need to be able to make distinctions between, individual patients who have, lived experience with the disease and different subpopulations, and making sure we're bringing a diversity and equity lens to that at all times. And then also understanding that we do have patient organizations who may have a different skill set when it comes to partnering, but that still is distinct from, connecting with individual patients and the different roles that they can play along the continuum, be it, in-trial interviews or helping you think through labeling language. These are all really unique opportunities, and making sure we're matching those right collaborations to the right time is, really important. When I think about how to improve collaboration and engagement, I also think about the need for us to make sure that we are activating the right resources at the right time, and that when we have those different engagements, that they are high quality. I'm a big fan of patient-focused medicines development and their patient engagement 7 criteria, because I think those are really important for making sure that we have shared purpose. Everyone knows the roles and responsibilities of the collaboration. People feel that they're being respected. We have transparency and communication. I think that's so important. Sometimes you have an engagement and people share insights with you, and then they go away and they have no idea what happened, or no idea how you action that feedback. And that's not good for collaboration, right? We want our collaborations to also be sustainable. When you're working in a disease area, this idea of kind of having these transactions, what about really making a commitment to even having standing groups of people who you consult with along your research development and commercialization process? And then I think lastly for me, the change management piece of this cannot be underestimated. I think as a community, we've done a great job of increasing awareness in terms of also instilling desire in organizations to kind of want to do this. And now we're kind of getting to the space where the rubber has to more increasingly meet the road, and it has to get pulled into your day-to-day activities. So it has to be pulled into however you're doing your project management for what does it take to run a program. These costs and these timelines have to be accounted for, so that the kind of patient engagement piece doesn't become like an afterthought that you kind of opt out of because we have to go fast and now we don't have the time or the money to kind of see the patient, so we're just going to go. We don't want that to be what the reality is, but we have to kind of continue to educate and advocate for change in our organizations to bring the people and the processes and the infrastructure and resources along, and the talent. I think there are different types of talent that we need to be thinking about hiring in to make sure our collaborations can be more impactful.
Thank you, Chiffon. Desiree?
Yeah, I love what you were saying, Chiffon. So a lot of it resonated with me. I think at least at Otsuka, a lot of things we've been talking about is ensuring that we do have a diverse patient population to be representative of all the patients that we treat. I think sometimes you get bucketed, maybe you're just dealing with ambassadors or patients that are very engaged, and we have to go to those underserved communities. We have to look at who all of these patients are and really get a nice representation. And so that being said, I think it's not just engaging with a small subset of patients. I think it is the market research that goes into it, the social listening, engaging with patients and co-creating. I think there's a lot of different sources of information that we can learn about patients, and somehow we have to have them all come together and learn, and then ultimately make decisions. And Chiffon, back to what you were saying, or maybe it was Jen, I apologize, but after you co-create something with patients, that follow-up is so important too. What was the outcome? How did you actually impact what we're doing as an organization? And so I think those are all really important things as we drive that patient engagement. We understand what they need and what they want, and ultimately deliver exactly in that vein what they need and what they want from a manufacturer standpoint, making it a better experience.
Thank you. Corey?
Yeah, I think this is a super important topic. To me, the collaboration comes back to interoperability, right? Because if the organization is not collaborating, the patient then becomes the glue. We look at Jen's story, right? Thank God she has the Apple tools to pull her stuff together, so she has an idea where she is in the journey. But we should really be. That's, I think, the reactive side of patient empowerment, right? I think we need to make the patient journey transparent to the patient, so they know, where am I at in the journey, who am I interacting with, what are the expectations, right? We should be proactive in providing that, so that the patient doesn't have all the onus on them to figure out, okay, here's where I'm at, here's what I need to prepare for, here's who I need to talk to and when, right? So if we are empowering the patient proactively in that way, then we can have a true collaboration. Because if the patient is spending all their time trying to do project management and manage these things, they're not going to have any capability for the other collaboration stuff.
Okay, Corey. Let's move forward to the next theme, which is definitely one of the most important one, especially during the pandemics. I think that the pandemics would look different for patients without technology, right? And that's why I would like to discuss the role of technology in the whole patient journey. And the question which I would like to ask, and let's start this time with you, Chiffon, is what part does technology have in continuous patient engagement? And will be still improved or not?
I think technology is a great enabler. We just have to make sure that it can't be technology for the sake of technology and just for something new and shiny. We have to make sure that's really anchored in a problem that exists in the patient community and that's very authentic to them. And sometimes that has not been the case, So I think as we think about digital and data and the technology there, patient really has to be at the center. And so I think with COVID-19, we have had this window of opportunity where practical solutions have been embraced because they've been essential, and people have felt this urgent essentiality to embrace these opportunities, be it decentralized trials. So how can we think more about retaining some of these new ways of working when we emerge from this pandemic? And so I think we want to keep thinking more and more even about real-time measurement, the opportunities that passive data collection afford us in terms of making sure that our measurements are more patient-centered. Sometimes we have clinical trial endpoints that aren't as patient relevant as they can be. What are the opportunities to use technology as a complement to, for example, to patient-reported outcomes, to understand what are some of the performance in your drugs, even pulling through into the real world? And so I think there's a lot of opportunities to use technology as an enabler, as long as we remember that we anchor it in real solutions to patients, and that technology should not be interpreted outside of also patient perspective.
So the solution is not just another new app, right?
I don't think patients want too many new apps. I mean, if there's one thing that I hear quite unanimously is, please, no more kind of proprietary dedicated apps. But if you can embed it in something that's already part of my life, well, then I might get some value from that.
Exactly. Good point. Corey, what's your opinion on that, coming from a technology company?
Yeah, no, that's a learning I've had personally over time, right? Is that it's not always a new app. I think the other thing there is that we touched on a little bit earlier with telehealth, right? Where there are going to be regional differences in how things play out, right? So, in some regions, an app may work for people. In other places, an app may not work at all, right? It may have to be, your technology may have to be a better paper handout that you give to the patient. So we have to, again, it's personalization. I think this personalization is maybe a little bit more to the segments in your population. But again, it is going to come down to specific patient issues, because the example of telehealth and cultural sensitivities inside your health is a good example. But if you've got a wide population that you're dealing with as well, there could be variations within those segments as well that you need to think about. So to me, it really comes back to when we think about planning these things, we have to have that empathy and understanding of who the patients are, what are their capabilities and sensitivities up front, right? because the worst thing is you spend all this time on an app and then no one uses it. So you know, we can use paper prototypes, we can use design thinking tools to do quick prototyping and figure out these things in a fast, iterative way that isn't going to be some huge time sink that sends your project, you know, 6 or 12 months down the road. You can do this kind of thing in days and weeks now.
All right, Jen?
I agree with all that's been said. I think maybe I'll add a different layer of the conversation around technology when it comes to data and data privacy. I think as we roll out more and more technology and just digital solutions, we need to think about how we're doing better informed consent with the patients. Because when a patient is using a certain type of technology, they may have hesitations, they may not know what's happening to their data. We can try to help them solve that moment. But the thing with all the data that comes out now is, what is its future use? And now that there are more M&As happening within sort of the healthcare space, it needs to be top of mind to understand and help patients understand what could be the future use case of their data. And certain patients will have different comfort levels around giving their data to academic research institutions, to pharma companies. Who is profiting off of that data? What do they see in exchange? So there are a lot of different pieces to this calculus that we need to be thoughtful about. Just saying, oh, well, you have access to your own data. We know that's not even true because of the example that I shared, but also what's going to happen to it should they're using some small startup that's being used in a clinical trial, their tech is being used, and then that startup gets bought out, and then now, you know, their data is purchased by a larger company that they did not think was going to have access to their data. I was on a previous conversation earlier this week around just thinking about how do we make sure there's no discrimination happening in the future, and do we need regulation around that for anti-discrimination for the data that may be collected, since we know that privacy has kind of gone out the window. But what do we do to make sure that people are comfortable engaging in clinical research or whatever it might be? If somebody got a hold of their data, what does that do to their life and livelihood? So while technology can solve some problems, it can also make a lot of other ones that perhaps are not top of mind. So just bringing that to the fore to make sure we're thinking through that as well.
Thank you, Jen. Desiree, same question for you.
Yeah, so I think going back to probably the beginning of our conversation, I think digital can be a mechanism in which patients engage, but really it comes down to co-creation. So it depends on the patient populations that you're serving, what will actually be achieved from that technology. Is it bringing transparency to their own data and their treatment journey? If yes, it's probably going to be really useful, and maybe it's enabling remote monitoring. In that case, I would argue that digital is really important, especially in particular patient populations. However, conversely, for other ones, maybe it's important just to have a digital companion where it's just doing medication reminders, and that's what some subset of that patient population is going to use. Then they can do that. But I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think digital is definitely a great enabler in some channels. Digital solutions can be a terrific solve for a lot of different patients, but really it comes down to co-creation and and ultimately understanding what those patients' needs are, and are they being addressed via that digital solution.
Definitely. Thank you, Desiree. We received a very interesting question from the audience, which is, what are the biggest changes in the patient journey due to the pandemic? Who would like to go first?
I just had a little trouble hearing you.
What are the biggest changes in the patient journey due to the pandemic? If
Well, I
there
think we've
are
talked some of that, you know, obviously there is remote care now where there didn't used to be. And that's probably the biggest challenge or the change that, you know, I myself had my very first telehealth appointment during the pandemic, which was a big shift for me, who's seen specialists that I've had for decades. And so I think there was that change most importantly, but I think around clinical trials, this rush to decentralized trials and serving people remotely is obviously a big shift, which is really exciting that it's here. So I think that that's also something that is very different, and I hope stays around.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest shifts we've seen is bringing care to their home. I think before, a lot of people would go out and they would readily go to lab appointments, pharmacy appointments, their own physician appointments, and now we are seeing that in the home. So whether it's telehealth or actually mobile options providing injections or infusions, whatever it is, it's all kind of going towards the home. So I don't know that the hospital setting is where people want to go at the moment. They're trying to avoid that at all costs. And unfortunately, some of it is also leading to patients not seeking care when they need it. So I think in general, when I've talked to some different payer organizations, claims are down overall for their population. So a lot less people are actually seeking that care, and they're kind of self-diagnosing at home and figuring out what to do on their own. So again, that goes back to patient empowerment. Patients are trying to solve on their own without necessarily the input of their traditional HCP, or they're meeting with somebody completely new via telehealth that they've never met with before. So an interesting shift, and it'll be interesting to see what happens after the pandemic if it goes back.
Zero. Corey, Chiffon.
I've been thinking a lot, especially about delaying care. I happen to have someone who I'm connected to who had been experiencing some pain, needed to have some back surgery. It was delayed. During that delay, there was increased weakness and pain. There was a thrombotic event, led to more delay, more pain. The person then fell, broke something, now isn't being rehabbed. So, there are people who really have experienced delays in care that have been very consequential, have led to exacerbations and a cascade of disease activity. And so this idea of access to care and who gets it and when and what it means for health outcomes is a really important one. And it's something that's been underpinning a lot of historical health disparities that we've seen there. And I think, regretfully, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that.
Okay. Corey.
Yeah, I think for me, we talk about these changes. What I'm hearing from some folks is that the changes haven't been rolled out as smoothly or as well as anticipated. And looking back, or maybe people looking forward, might even anticipate hiccups. But there are certain people who are better suited to handle a remote meeting, and some are better suited for a face-to-face meeting. Some of that is technology, as we've talked about, and the space that you have to do it with. Some of it is just general attributes of a person, right? Where you are better suited for that. To me, there's an interesting thing where probably most people have been in the doctor's office, and the doctor is spending most of their time looking into a computer screen, right, instead of face to face. And that lack of face-to-face, right? If you're doing the telehealth on the phone without the camera, there's a lot of information that you could be missing, right? It might be, a change in complexion. It might be a subtle facial movement. So to me, it's these, I think, nuances to communication that we need to keep focusing on and considering how we handle that, right? We've made the initial shift of getting on board with new channels, but making sure that we can receive all the right inputs on there is still going to be key, and that's a learning opportunity.
Correct. We are approaching to the year end, and I would maybe like to ask to take the crystal balls which you are having, and maybe to outlook how patient engagement will look like maybe after this whole pandemic finishes. What kind of digital will stay with us, and what will actually go maybe back to normal? Who would like to dare to give such kind of outlook of to the future?
I think that maybe we'll see more convergence between the community that's been talking so much about real world data and the community that's been talking so much about patient engagement. I find it so interesting that so often these are seen to be quite different, when I think there is a lot of overlap and a lot of synergy there. And so I'm hoping that conversation will broaden out a bit going forward. I'm hoping that we'll continue to also elevate the caregiver within this conversation. So I try to say the patient and their care partner, We know that the care partner is really essential to everything from accessing trials to potentially observer-reported outcomes in clinical trials, and even care management and nursing tasks. And so I'm hoping that the caregiver continues to be elevated in this conversation, and we'll have more convergence between the real world data and patient engagement communities.
Thank you.
I'll go out on a limb and I'll say that I do think digital will remain, probably not to the degree that it is right now, but I think telehealth, I think a lot of people have realized how simple it is, and they're able to sit in the comfort of their home or their office and meet with somebody very quickly. So I think that experience has been good for many, and I think some of that will absolutely continue. As far as thinking about, you know, new product launches or even just products that are a little more complex, I think digital will play a role there as well, just to help the management of the overall disease state and also the therapy. So those are my predictions, that we'll see definitely more than we did before, but it'll probably even out a little bit. The pendulum won't be so far as it is right now.
Corey, Jen?
Yeah, just waiting to see if Jen wants to go first.
No, well, I will then. Thank you, Corey. I think that from my end, I would like to see patients have more choices, that we have these options now. As I believe Corey was mentioning, it's not that these are all going to be for the right different types of appointments or needs for patients or patient types. So I would just like to have a future with a menu of options for patients and providers and whoever other stakeholders might be, to be able to pick what works best for them in any given situation.
Yeah, and to me, what I look at is going back to the technology talk a little bit, is I think sometimes the best technology is no technology or invisible technology, right? So if we can get the technology out of the equation, or put the technology in a way that is super low effort, right? And to me, one of those things, I'm going to come back to what I said earlier, is moving from the push to the pull, so that the patient has more control in things. And to me, I think one of the powerful things that we're really just scratching the surface on right now is the digital agents, chatbots and whatnot, right? Because there's a lot of good things we can do there. We can use the chatbot to be analyzing the sentiment and the mood of the patient as they're interacting. We can have checkpoints in there, so like, you know, at the click of a button, we can redirect the patient from the bot to a live person, right? Because we're sensing something that's going on, or they've hit us with a hard problem. And likewise, if it's a simple question, we can direct them to the documentation or information that they need. So to me, that's one of those things that I think has a lot of potential for driving that collaboration and engagement and empowerment on the patient side. So I think we'll see more of that.
Thank you, Corey. And with that, we came to the end of this very interesting session. Anyone would like to add anything which we didn't touch today? No? Okay, so with that, I would like to thank you once again for joining Next Patient Week. It's Friday, but was definitely a very meaningful and insightful discussion. So thank you, Jen, Chiffon, Desiree, and Corey. It was a pleasure to have you all in that particular session. This video will be also published on our official YouTube channel. So if you missed the chance to hear this extraordinary session, please make sure you visit our YouTube channel. And thank you very much once again. Wish all the best for the upcoming holiday season.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Happy holidays.